Today I'm going to be talking about the Reilly palette. And the Reilly palette derives its name from Frank J. Reilly, who was an instructor in New York City. He taught for decades at the Art Students League and then finally created his own academy in 1960 and then taught there, of course, at his school until his untimely death in, I want to say it was January 1967. But the point is, what really helped Frank achieve a degree of fame were actually his students. His students went on to produce some of the greatest commercial illustrations and later on fine art, in America. And a lot of that, many would say, in fact, many of his students would probably give credit to the palette that he taught them how to use. And they typically would refer to that as the Reilly palette. And that's actually what this is right here. This is, you can see this back over here. This is actually a standard palette that we've all seen. And it's, the colors are just set out, in an arc-like manner. And then, of course, all the mixing is done here. This palette behind me here, the colors are set out in on a grid. It's set out on a grid format. And I went ahead and I've created a short little clip that goes into greater detail about that to show you how it's laid out and how you could set your own out if you thought you wanted to pursue this. But it does give you remarkable control over the craft. And I use it all the time. I use both, actually. I use this style palette or this what is typically a controlled palette, or referred to as a controlled palette, besides being called a Reilly palette. But I use both, and there's a place for both of them. But I'll go ahead and roll on that clip right now, and you can check it out. And grays across the top here. This is actually the first row that I mix, and it's basically I mix this row, and all the way down. You can keep going, different colors and so forth, as you may need for the particular piece you're working on. But so this is ivory black here, and this is titanium white. And then basically what you do is so for example, what I'll typically do myself, this is just something that I've chosen to do over time, I'll try and arrive at this middle value. So I'll take, and by the way, all the mixing is done down here. All the mixing happens down here. So I'll take a large portion of titanium white here and a large portion of ivory black here, and then I'll mix them together down here and come up with this middle value gray. And ideally, of course, I can check that value against a scale I've got down here, and we'll say that I arrive at the proper value gray, and then I'll plug that in here. And usually what I'll do, I'll make quite a bit of it, and then I can take and mix this gray with some white and arrive at this, and so forth, head this way, and same thing heading down in value this way with the black. It just seems to speed things up if I mix this first. But the bottom line is that you take and you set these out, and these are all lined up sequentially, and they're stepped like this, just like you see this value scale down here. Okay, you do the same thing. So in this case, this is red, and this is alizarin crimson, and this is cad red light, and then of course you've got white here. Same thing. You do all your mixing down here. And by the way, when I get done mixing my grays, as an example, I clean the palette. I clean this out. I'll leave white over here, get rid of the ivory black, and so this section of the palette is cleaned. And then I'll mix the reds, mix the oranges, yellows, and whatever colors. I was doing a face, by the way, when I did this palette that you're looking at right now, and so I actually added some pinks in here. This is quinacridone and rose. And so I actually created an overlay to show you. There you go. So there's titanium white, as I've mentioned, and you've got cad red light here, cad orange, yellow ochre, quinacridone and rose. If I had put it out straight out of the tube, it would have fit right here. But because I was working on the face, I didn't really need to go this far down on the scale. So same thing, raw umber, I didn't need to fit that here, just because the key on the face was high enough that I didn't need to go that far down on that. So burnt umber is basically a very dark orange. And so to create these, so we'll just use this line right here. So to create these, I would take cad orange, mix it with burnt umber to arrive at this value. Same thing, and all these steps are created by mixing these two together until you get the right value based on this. So for example, this, it's all being mixed down here. This right here, this value would basically, you know, when you check it, disappear. So if I was mixing this down here, I would check it and go, oh, where it, you know, when you squint, it just about disappears on this. Okay, well then that's fine. Well, then you go ahead and you place the paint here, and same thing, you keep stepping your way to cad orange, and then from this way, heading off to the right, as you raise the value, of course you're mixing it with white. Most of your saturated colors tend to be in the middle. There's an exception with cad yellow light that fits over here. In this instance, I just didn't need, because I'm doing a face, I just didn't need this hyper saturated yellow sitting out here. If I did, then I would have gone ahead and mixed yellow ochre with cad yellow light and plug these values in sequentially. So that should help. Now the next thing I'm going to do, I'll get rid of that. Next thing is the overarching theory behind it. And so what happens, when I was originally trained, basically I was trained to have a brush for every value. Brush here, brush here, brush here, brush here. I don't do that anymore, but it does make for super clean painting. These days, I'll take and usually have different size brushes, but we'll say in this instance, just to try and make my point, I'll have 3 brushes that are say size 6 brushes, 3 size 6 brushes. I would take and have one brush for this range here. I would take and have another brush for this middle range here, and I would take and have another brush for this darker range of values down here. And maybe have a 4th brush for this absolute black or dark down in here, or and have a 5th brush for white. Now, so what happens if you've got a section on your painting that is we'll just use this center section right here. So if you've got an area in your painting that we'll say it's a red, and it's a type of red you've identified. The color is a red, and so you go ahead and you'd reach for this red and you'd bring it down here, and this is basically where all your mixing happens. And so you'd bring this red down here, and you might even take and try it on the painting and go, gosh, you know, it's that red right out of the, well, this is actually a little bit lighter. There's right out of the tube. But the point is, this is too saturated. So you've got this down here. You tried it on your painting. It's too saturated. So it's very simple. What you do is you take and you grab this gray up here, and then you use this gray to gray your color here. And the beauty of that is that typically with what we would typically refer to as a loose palette, what happens with that, with a loose palette, is you have to take to gray this out, you grab the complement. So in this case, it would be a green. And so the problem is, we'll say we had green set out here. And the problem with that is that when you grab the green and you bring that green, you know, to mix it, you mix the green with it, you immediately, so everything's fine, it's just this is a little too saturated. So when you try and gray that, the green that you grab will be dark. And so then you have to mix white with the green to arrive at the value here to desaturate your red. And so it just takes a bunch of time, and it's less controlled. And there are other issues I can talk about, but I'm not going to sweat that right now. The point is, this is a very fast, very efficient way to take and gray colors without losing your value structure. So you can also, by the way, before I forget to mention it, you can also take and get half values in here. And so while I'm working, I'll take and have my colors are mixed here in this value range, well, as an example, and maybe I'll be working in this section here. But you can actually split these two, and you can have half values. You can actually take and quarter values, all the rest. I'm not going to get into that right now either. But the point is, you can split these values. You can mix some of this as an example, some of this gray as an example with some of this, and this would produce almost like a green that you could take and put right in here and mix that, and then go ahead and, of course, use that on your painting. So that is probably about it as far as a quick overview. So hopefully that makes sense out of the, this removes some of the mystery or brings greater clarity to the Reilly palette. Couple of things I want to add here before closing. First of all, I want to say that yes, it takes more time to mix the color like that, but it saves time while you paint. It's remarkable how fast you can paint when the colors are all pre-mixed like that. And also that if you want your paint to last longer, we'll say you set that grid out like that. While you're mixing each pile of paint before you place it up on the grid, if you put a drop of clove oil in with each pile of paint and then cover it with plastic wrap, like you might put around a sandwich or something. But anyway, that clear plastic wrap, and you lay that over the Reilly palette, the set or control palette. If you set that out over the top of the paint like that, it's amazing how long that paint will last for you. Just pull it off, paint with it, and then you can get another piece of plastic wrap and put it over there and seal it, day after day, and it really prolongs the life of the paint. The second thing I want to do before we close up here is I'm going to show you here, the three different artists that I'm going to show you here are all Reilly students that were successful illustrators and then went on to be wildly successful as fine artists. And so you've got Clark Hewlings, and then you've got James Bama, and then you've got Tom Ryan. And so anyway, I hope that helps, and again, brings some clarity to what people are talking about when they mention the Reilly palette. My name is Chris Mummert. Thanks for watching.